Hello, listening squirrels. I'm on earlier, so hopefully I can stay awake. Let's see. The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. See, the last sentence or so I read. Instead, she was afraid another would be difficult to get after living there, for the house had a very indifferent character. There was far too much card playing and such like. She was very much mistaken if some of the people who came there oftenest were quite as honest as they might be. But she wouldn't have it known that she had said so for the world. Then there were some rambling allusions to a rejected sweetheart who had threatened to go a-soldiering, a final promise of knocking at the door early in the morning, and good night. The child did not feel comfortable when she was left alone. She could not help thinking of the figure stealing through the passage downstairs, and what the girl had said did not tend to reassure her. The men were very ill-looking. They might get their living by robbing and murdering travelers. Who could tell? Reasoning herself out of these fears, or losing sight of them for a little while, there came the anxiety to which the adventures of the night gave rise. Here was the old passion awakened again in her grandfather's breast, and to what further distraction it might tempt him, heaven only knew. What fears their absence might have occasioned already. Persons might be seeking for them even then. I don't itch my nose all day long. I get on here and it's like tickle, tickle, tickle. Would they be forgotten in the morning or turned adrift again? Oh, why had they stopped in that strange place? It would have been better under any circumstances to have gone on. At last, sleep gradually stole upon her, a broken, fitful sleep, troubled by dreams of falling from high towers and waking with a start and in great terror. A deeper slumber followed this, and then, what? That figure in the room. A figure was there. Yes, she had drawn up the blind to admit the light when it should be dawn, and there, between the foot of the bed and the dark casement, it crouched and slunk along, groping its way with noiseless hands, and stealing round the bed. She had no voice to cry for help, no power to move, but lay still, watching it. On it came, on. Silently and stealthily to the bed's head, the breath so near her pillow that she shrunk back into it lest those wandering hands should light upon her face. Back again it stole to the window, then turned its head towards her. The dark form was a mere blot upon the lighter darkness of the room, but she saw the turning of the head, and felt and knew how the eyes looked and the ears listened. There it remained, motionless as she. At length, still keeping the face towards her, it busied its hands in something, and she heard the chink of money. Then on it came again, silent and stealthily as before, and replacing the garments it had taken from the bedside, dropped upon its hands and knees and crawled away. How slowly it seemed to move now that she could hear but not see it, creeping along the floor. It reached the door at last and stood upon its feet. The steps creaked beneath its noiseless tread, and it was gone. The first impulse of the child was to fly from the terror of being by herself in that room, to have somebody by, not to be alone, and then her power of speech would be restored. With no consciousness of having moved, she gained the door. There was the dreadful shadow pausing at the bottom of the steps. She could not pass it. She might have done so, perhaps, in the darkness without being seized, but her blood curdled at the thought. The figure stood quite still, and so did she, not boldly, but of necessity, for going back into the room was hardly less terrible than going on. The rain beat fast and furiously without and ran down It's time for the Yarn Geek Tuesday tutorials. Let's see. That's terrible. And the rain beat fast and furiously without and ran down in plashing streams from the thatched roof. Some summer insect with no escape into the air flew blindly to and fro, beating its body against the walls and ceiling and filling the silent place with murmurs. The figure moved again. The child involuntarily did the same. Once in her grandfather's room, she would be safe. It crept along the passage until it came to the very door she longed so ardently to reach. The child, in the agony of being so near, had almost darted forward, with the design of bursting into the room and closing it behind her, when the figure stopped again. The idea flashed suddenly upon her. What if it entered there and had a design upon the old man's life? She turned faint and sick. It did. It went in. There was a light inside. The figure was now within the chamber, and she, still dumb, quite dumb, and almost senseless, stood looking on. The door was partly open, not knowing what she meant to do, but meaning to preserve him, or be killed herself. She staggered forward and looked in. What sight was that which met her view? The bed had not been lain on, but was smooth and empty, and at a table sat the old man himself, the only living creature there, his white face pinched and sharpened by the greediness which made his eyes unnaturally bright, counting the money of which his hands had robbed her. It was her grandfather. He's got that gambling bug. And that's the end of chapter 30. Oh my gosh, 8 minutes, and I could have finished that yesterday. We'll see how much more I can read of chapter 31. With steps more faltering and unsteady than those with which she had approached the room, the child withdrew from the door and groped her way back to her own chamber. The terror she had lately felt was nothing compared with that which now oppressed her. No strange robber, no treacherous host conniving at the plunder of his guests or stealing to their beds to kill them in their sleep. No nightly prowler, however terrible and cruel, could have awakened in her bosom half the dread which the recognition of her silent visitor inspired. The gray-headed old man, gliding like a ghost into her room and acting the thief while he supposed her fast asleep, then bearing off his prize and hanging over it with the ghastly exultation she had witnessed, was worse, immeasurably worse, and far more dreadful for the moment to reflect upon than anything her wildest fancy could have suggested. If he should return, there was no lock or bolt upon the door, and if distrustful of having left some money yet behind, he should come back to seek for more. A vague awe and horror surrounded the idea of his slinking in again with stealthy tread and turning his face toward the empty bed, while she shrank down close at his feet to avoid his touch, which was almost insupportable. She sat and listened. Hark! A footstep on the stairs, and now the door was slowly opening. It was but imagination, yet imagination had all the terrors of reality. Nay, it was worse. For the reality would have come and gone, and there an end, but in imagination it was always coming, and never went away. The feeling which beset the child was one of dim, uncertain horror. She had no fear of the dear old grandfather, in whose love for her this disease of the brain had been engendered, but the man she had seen that night, wrapped in the game of chance, lurking in her room and counting the money by the glimmering light, seemed like another creature in his shape, a monstrous distortion of his image, a something to recoil from and be the more afraid of because it bore a likeness to him and kept close about her as he did. She could scarcely connect her own affectionate companion, save by his loss, with this old man, so like yet so unlike him. She had wept to see him dull and quiet. How much greater cause she had for weeping now. The child sat watching and thinking of these things until the phantom in her mind so increased in gloom and terror that she felt it would be a relief to hear the old man's voice, or, if he were asleep, even to see him and banish some of the fears that clustered round his image. She stole down the stairs and passage again. The door was still ajar as she had left it, and the candle burning as before. She had her own candle in her hand, prepared to say, as if he were walking, that she was uneasy and could not rest, and had come to see if his were still alight. Looking into the room, she saw him lying calmly on his bed, and so took courage to enter. Fast asleep, no passage in the face, no avarice, no anxiety, no wild desire, all gentle, tranquil, and at peace. This was not the gambler or the shadow in the room. This was not even the worn and jaded man whose face had so often met her own in the gray morning light. This was her dear old friend, her harmless fellow traveler, her good and kind grandfather. And I'm going to stop right there. I know that wasn't a whole lot, but I want to go to Ginger's. I need to start looking at the time when I do this, so. Y'all be sweet. Don't be ugly. And maybe if you see this on Tuesday night, July 5th at 7:07, and provided Ginger's on Yarn Geek, I may see you over there. Love ya. Alright, so be sweet. Okay, bye.